This is the oral on the respiratory system, oral number 8. Do yourself a favor and look at the objectives on page 31. How many pages are there? One? That's right, there's only one. I'm not going to lie and tell you this is easy, because it isn't. Nothing in anatomy is. But it sure is a heck of a lot less material than the last couple units. So take a deep breath and let's get started. Did you clock in? Remember that you need 3 more hours in the AT lab before you take the next oral. This oral consists of knowing a few models, learning the muscles involved in breathing, and one long tracing. You'll trace from the outside environment through the nose to the capillaries in the deepest part of the lungs. You will also have to memorize the various epithelial tissues that line the different regions of the respiratory tract along the way. As usual, there are structures on the models that you must recognize that are not a part of the tracing. So let's get started. Associated with the respiratory system are 4 pairs of sinuses. Look at the diagram on page 746. Do that now. You can see that the sinuses are named for the bones within which they lie, so that makes it pretty easy if you remember the bones. The frontal bone has the frontal sinus, ethmoidal bone, ethmoidal sinus, the sphenoid bone, the sphenoidal sinus, and the maxillary bone. That's where your upper teeth are. The maxillary bone has sinuses, and those are called the maxillary sinuses. Sinuses are air-filled chambers within the skull. They help lighten the weight of the skull and contribute to the quality of the sound of our speech. All you have to do is have plugged sinuses to see the effect that they have on your speech. All you have to do is have plugged sinuses to see what effect your sinuses have on your speech. Is the quality of your speech of any significance to us? It probably is. Many studies with animals, other than humans, have shown that mate selection is very dependent upon auditory quality. Do you think it would affect your ability to be selected as a mate if you sounded all nasally all the time? I don't know, but it might. Because the sinuses are associated with the nasal area, they're technically called the paranasal sinuses. Para meaning nearby the nasal cavity. Speaking of speech, where is the sound production mechanism located? We call it the voice box, but its anatomical name is what? Well, turn to page 748 of your textbook to find the answer there. It's called the larynx. Now, I don't want to hear any larynx out there. It's larynx or larynx when you say it fast. You just sound uneducated when you say larynx. Larynx is not correct. So don't use your larynx to say larynx, or you will be duly chastised by me and other instructors on duty. Now inside the voice box are the vocal cords. Well, we just learned that we don't want to call it the voice box. It's the larynx. And now we need to say that the vocal cords should be called vocal folds. See page 31 of your objectives under the category of the larynx to see the various names for the vocal cords. A diagram of this is found on page 749. Air moving over these vocal ligaments give us our speech, which as you just learned is modified by our sinuses, as well as other parts of our anatomy such as the oral cavity and the size of our larynx. The larynx itself is made out of cartilage and has a bone associated with it. Make sure you see the slideshow on the Q drive called Larynx Models. The first slide shows the largest cartilage, called the thyroid, and the cricoid cartilage, the largest cartilages, I should say, called the thyroid and the cricoid cartilage below that. Think of a cricket chirping when you say cricoid. All right, wake up. I don't want to put you to sleep here. Perhaps I already have. The hyoid bone is seen at the top of the larynx. It's the bone associated with the larynx. In the next slide, you see the epiglottis. It's another cartilage that pulls down or flops over to cover the glottis when you swallow, so food particles don't end up in your trachea. The glottis is the passageway between the vocal folds, So it's handy to have an epiglottis that can close off that glottis so you don't have food going down there and choke you up. In this view of the slide, you can see the vocal folds and the glottis, but the vestibular folds are not included on this model, so that the action of the vocal cords can be better demonstrated. In the next slide, you can see the remaining cartilages of the larynx. They are the arytenoid, the corniculate, and the cuneiform cartilage. How do you say that? Arytenoid, the corniculate, and the cuneiform cartilage. In the last slide is the trachea and its cartilages. What letter of the alphabet expresses their shape, the shape of the cartilages of the trachea? Well, if you removed one of the tracheal cartilages, you would find that it is not a complete ring. It's not an O. It's open along the back to accommodate the passage of food through the esophagus. This not a ring cartilage of the trachea would look like the letter C, so we call them C-shaped tracheal cartilages. Before we get to the mechanism of breathing, let's talk about the lungs themselves.